What if the problem isn't that you're bad at business, but that you've been trying to build your business in a way your brain was never designed for? Sometimes the biggest thing stopping entrepreneurs isn't lack of talent, it's not lack of ideas or even lack of strategy, it's fear. And not the loud kind, the hidden kind that shows up as procrastination, doesn't it? Overwhelm, constantly second guessing. Welcome to the Podcast Profits Unleashed podcast. So we explore how coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs can grow their business through smarter strategy, stronger positioning, and building a business that actually works for who you are. I'm your host, Karen Roberts. Today, I'm really excited about this one. I'm joined by Diann Wingert, a business strategist, coach, host of the ADHD-ish Podcast. She helps entrepreneurs with ADHD traits. I wouldn't know what you're talking about. Create businesses that balance passion, purpose, and profit without trying to force themselves into systems that were never designed for them in the first place. After a 20-year career as a psychotherapist and serial business owner, she pivoted. That word has been used so much since COVID, but she pivoted into coaching neurodivergent entrepreneurs and small business owners, helping them build ADHD-friendly businesses that are sustainable. So this episode is all about the hidden fears that stop so many ADHD entrepreneurs before they even get started. So whether you've been diagnosed or just simply recognizing some of those traits in yourself, this conversation is going to help you think differently about productivity, success, and just the whole way you build your business. So let's dive in. Welcome to the show, Diann.
I can't wait to unpack all of this with you, Karen.
I've been looking forward to this for so long. So for you, was there a specific moment where you realized that many entrepreneurs with ADHD traits weren't necessarily struggling because they weren't capable, but because they were trying to operate in systems that fundamentally didn't actually fit them?
Of course, it started with my own story. And in full transparency, I have ADHD myself. I actually studied ADHD at graduate school when I was starting my second career as a psychotherapist in the 90s. I have 3 adult children who all have ADHD as well. In fact, I have spawned all 3 subtypes, as I like to say. So the ADHD force is strong with this one. And I needed to learn these things for myself. I knew I was intelligent. I knew I worked hard. I knew that I was creative. I knew that it wasn't a matter of not having the will or the skill, but I just couldn't do things the way other people did them. Those that just didn't work for me. And yet I didn't really understand that I could give myself permission to figure out what would work for me. Now, as a psychotherapist, I worked with all kinds of people over the length of my career. But what I noticed towards the end was that the people I enjoyed working with the most were not only folks with ADHD, but folks who were self-employed, because it's the intersection of those two things that attracts me. Folks with ADHD oftentimes become entrepreneurs because we just can't conform to the norm very successfully. So we either keep changing jobs, changing careers, getting fired because we can't bend the knee to the powers that be. And so we oftentimes wander into entrepreneurship because we either can't get anyone else to hire us after we've burned all our bridges, or because we just think, you know what, I don't want a boss. But it's an entirely different thing to realize, oh, now I have to be the boss of myself. And that's where we struggle because of our executive functioning challenges and our emotional dysregulation, including fear of rejection, which we will get into in great detail, I'm sure.
What a massive one, an absolute massive one. And it's so fascinating because I personally, I would say it's got to be, I think it was during COVID, during the lockdown. I had my podcast and I was interviewing a ADHD coach, and everything he was sharing, I was like, I never realized it, because I had this image or perception of what ADHD is. My mother would say, my brother had ADHD. He couldn't keep still. And he was constantly on the go. And I think, well, that's not me. So when you talk about the different types of ADHD, you said all your children are in the different categories. Can we start there? Because I think a lot of people don't necessarily know, right? I haven't been officially diagnosed. My daughter has, but it's quite obvious. So could you start there?
Absolutely. And in fact, I think it's really important because for many years, in fact, for decades upon decades, the classic scenario that people have in their mind when they hear ADHD is, and I quote, a little boy who is bouncing off the walls. I don't know how many times you've heard that, but I literally lost count. So when I was in graduate school in the 90s, I decided to change my career at that time. I had a previously successful career in sales, which many folks with ADHD do. Many folks with ADHD are drawn into sales. But I decided to change my career, go to get a master's degree in social work at UCLA, and change what I did for a living, because my oldest son at that time was classic ADHD in the way that we thought of it. In fact, at that time, all the professors, all these renowned experts were telling me, ADHD is something that affects a very small percentage of boys, less than 5%, and they all outgrow it by their adolescence or adulthood. I wanted to do my master's thesis on whether, in fact, that was true, because I was running a social skills support group for school-age boys with ADHD as part of my training. And it was in the evening. And so when the parents would come to pick these little boys up after the group, it was almost exclusively fathers who were picking them up, because the moms were at home with the other kids and doing the homework and doing the dinner and the bath and all that. So I'm literally meeting dad after dad after dad. And I didn't just say, here's your kid and be on your way. I would tell them, this is what we did. This is what we focused on. These are the ways that you can support your son at home, and let his teacher know. And I didn't want them to just have an experience while they were with me, but no carryover. So I let these fathers know, hey, this is how you can maintain the work that we're doing here at home and in the community and at school. But I just met all these dads, Karen, who could really hardly even stand still long enough for me to give them feedback on their own child, which was helpful. And I started thinking, I don't think they outgrow this. I think I know I'm just a lowly grad student, and I really got a lot of pushback from the experts. But I said, you know what? This is what I'm going to do my thesis on, whether this is in fact a childhood condition or a lifelong condition. Now, keep in mind, this was years before ADHD appeared in the adult section of the psychiatric diagnostic manual, and it was decades before anyone was even talking about ADHD in females. So here we are now, decades later. And by the way, I finished my thesis. My conclusion was that this is a lifelong condition. I graduated. I went on with my career in life. I promptly forgot all about it and started doing a true ADHD fashion. When I think back now, I'm like, damn, girl, you could have been the grandmother of ADHD in adults. But no, I did my thing and I went on my way. Fast forward, my daughter gets diagnosed in college years later. My second son's never officially diagnosed with classic. The 3 subtypes, and this is part of why so many women, including you and I, have been overlooked for years. This notion that ADHD is little boys and it's hyperactive, impulsive, can't sit still, can't pay attention, can't listen, can't learn, can't keep his hands to himself, and so on. That subtype is ADHD predominantly predominantly hyperactive, impulsive. The primary symptoms in that subtype are hyperactivity and impulsivity. And frankly, most of these folks are male. Many of them get into drugs and crime. It's been researched and published widely that the prisons are full of men who became criminals because of their undiagnosed ADHD, which is a real shame. Now, the other subtype, which is more women, is the inattentive distractible. This tends to be the perfectionist, procrastinator, people-pleasing, overthinking, second-guessing, ruminating, anxious, avoidant, insecure woman who may know she's creative and brilliant, but she's so terrified of making a wrong decision or making a mistake that she overthinks everything. When these females become entrepreneurs, they really struggle because, as you and I both know, you have to take action to figure out what works. And if you're so terrified of making a mistake, you can't take enough action to figure out what works. So those are the two extremes: hyperactive, impulsive, inattentive, distractible, more male, more female. And then there's the folks right in the middle who are combined type. Now you might think, oh, they must be the worst off. They have twice as many symptoms. Actually, I think they have the best outcomes and make the best entrepreneurs because, and I'm a combined type, by the way, and you probably are too if you are diagnosable. And I want to get to what diagnosable means in a second. Combined type means, yes, you are distractible. Yes, when you get interrupted, you get off track, and sometimes you don't find your way back to where you came from. You walk into a room and you're like, what am I doing here? So you have those traits as well, but you also have enough hyperactivity and enough impulsivity that you always need to be doing something. You always need to have projects. You always need to be busy. And if that's a female, we don't really think of that as ADHD. We just think she's always got to be doing something. She's always got to be active. She's always got to have 10 different projects or hobbies, and often the hyperactivity in the combined type female shows up as chatty Kathy. Her hyperactivity is, I feel so seen, Diann. We tend to be talkers. And by the way, that's really helpful if you go into podcasting, either as a host or guest or sales. Now, on the diagnosable part, and I think most women figure out they have ADHD because they have a child who gets diagnosed. And if the diagnosing provider is skilled, they'll say, which side of the family do we think this came from? And you're both looking at each other and thinking, no, me. That's how most women figure it out. That's how I figured it out because my oldest son was diagnosed, even though I was working with people and even had to write up in my thesis that I identify with a lot of these traits. We don't find what we're not looking for. And we have not been looking for ADHD in females for many years. Plus the fact that they tend to be the inattentive distractible, which most lay folks will say, oh, I'm not ADHD, I'm ADD. When they say I'm ADD, it's because they say, oh, I'm not hyperactive. There's only one diagnosis. It is ADHD. If you're not hyperactive, you have the inattentive distractible type, but you're still ADHD because that's the actual diagnosis. Now, why would you get diagnosed? If you can figure out how to align your business and your life with the strengths and struggles that come with being ADHD, do you need to be diagnosed? Not necessarily. No. And by the way, the more you align your business and life with the strengths and struggles of ADHD, even if you have all the criteria, you might not be considered diagnosable because it's not just having these traits, it's that you have to demonstrate you are impaired by these traits. This is why you hear some people say, ADHD is my entrepreneurial superpower. It's not a superpower. It wouldn't be in the psychiatric manual if it was. But if somebody has been able to craft their life around the strengths and struggles so effectively, they may have ADHD AF, but they won't be diagnosable because they've eliminated the impairment. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Oh my goodness, it just makes so much sense. Yes, because I was always told, oh, maybe you're hyper-focused ADHD.
Yes.
I'll go in and then hit a wall.
Yes.
and don't want to do anything.
Yep.
And you're so right. I was in the clinic with the doctor who was diagnosing my daughter with autism. And it was him who suggested maybe that she was also ADHD, and so was I. And since then, it has been fascinating. And just before we came on, I mentioned that for 20 years, I was in the fitness industry. Perfect thing.
Yes.
My life was chaos. 6 o'clock in the morning, central London on a spin bike, then 9 o'clock over there, and then giving a sports massage. And then I've got to be there for lunchtime, 2 classes back to back, and all different because I wanted to teach everything.
Of course you did. We hate being limited.
No. So when we talk about the superpower, and I agree with you, it's can be dangerous, because then if there's people out there that's identifying with what you have just shared and they are struggling, it doesn't actually help when people are saying it's a superpower. And I'll admit, I have said that jokingly. I'm quite happy with it. But just like you said, it's because, and this wasn't deliberate, I'm just very fortunate that I have fallen into the kinds of things that do suit me before knowing.
Yes.
But yes, to those who are listening thinking, I am struggling, they don't want to hear that it is a super, and it's not, because there's lots of things in my life that aren't right. But how do you what makes a business ADHD friendly? And what's the biggest shift that you help people make when they first start actually working with you? How can you help them?
It really, a lot of it depends on what their subtype is. And I don't talk about that so much. I just use it as a filter because we gave up being a psychotherapist for a reason. I want to help people in their business, and I don't want to help people as a clinician. However, if you are an inattentive, distractible type ADHD, your main challenge in business is perfectionism and rejection sensitivity. And I know we're going to unpack that a little more in a minute. So it's like reducing the fear factor about taking risks. That's like the prime directive. If a person's predominantly inattentive and distractible, it's okay, how do we craft your schedule? How do we craft your environment to reduce or eliminate distractions and interruptions? We decide, okay, when do you get into your flow state? Are you able to access hyper focus? How are you using that hyper focus? I nerd out on this stuff. I get granular. Everybody doesn't get the same morning routine. Everybody doesn't have the same schedule. It's like, when are you the most creative? What time of day? How long can that last? Some people can just go for a couple of hours and then they're exhausted. Other people can go for 6 hours of hyperfocus, but then don't ask their brain to do anything cognitively challenging for the next 48 hours. So I call it right sizing. Right sizing is not upsizing, downsizing, scaling. It is making your business suited to the way your brain already works. That's one of the primary things we do. Another thing is, most of us have more brilliant ideas in a year than neurotypical people will have in a lifetime. And we talked about this before we started recording. Every idea we have is irresistible. I call it the soulmate phenomenon. Each idea we get, it's, this is and I will wake up at 6 in the morning. In fact, now my husband and I can't even sleep in the same room because I have done this to him so many times. He's like, you're making me crazy. I literally would wake up at 6 o'clock and say, you know what I just thought? And I would have a fully formed course, program, business model, entirely new business. So you're killing me with this stuff, Diann. Just stop already. I can't. So I sleep in my own room now, and I can wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And if I need to run to my computer and just download that idea. But here's the thing. Having a lot of great ideas is also not a superpower, because you can't do them all. You can't possibly do them all. And frankly, even though nobody wants to hear this, they're not all worthy of your effort. You're just getting off on the dopamine that comes with a fresh new idea. It's like the pancake at the top of the stack. And the only reason why you think it's the best is because it hasn't been spoiled by real experience yet. Am I right? So we have all these ideas. So I help people decide and discern and filter. I don't crush anybody's ideas, and I don't encourage people to try to stop their ideas. They're like wild horses clamoring to get out of the corral. We need to let them out of our head and into the world, but we don't immediately start working on them. They go into the idea parking lot. So we have idea capture, then we contain them in the parking lot. You are not allowed to work on them right away because that's how we waste a tremendous amount of time. Then that leads to the problem. And so many people who work with me come to me with, I have so many programs, so many offers, so many packages, and I'm exhausted and I don't know how to sell them. And I don't know, because you have too much going on. We need to declutter your business by determining what your most powerful offers are and then shaping the business around that. I personally think if we want to have a standout, sought after, profitable coaching or consulting business, I try to encourage people to either have a singular offer or an offer suite of no more than 3 offers. Why? Because each offer has to have its own marketing strategy, and we don't have the bandwidth for that. Make sense?
True. Oh, 100%. I'm listening to it and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that was me.
Yep.
Quite a few years ago now, I was trying to do everything, sales training and digital marketing and this and that. Ooh. The moment you simplify and just hone in, although it goes against our grain, doesn't it?
It's so hard. Yes, we don't want to do it. And also, I think and the more clever you are, and a lot of females with ADHD did well in school compared to most males. So we like learning. And especially if you're a coach or consultant, come on now. We love learning and we love sharing what we've learned. So deciding not to share something that we've learned, madam, how dare you? But here's the thing. We are also prone to burnout, exhaustion, and then the powerful urge to just burn it all down and start over. Listen, I've burned my whole life down more than once. About every 10 years was my cycle. I would literally burn my whole life to the ground and start over because I thought that was the only way I could clear the deck and give myself freedom. That is very destructive and very damaging to your self-esteem. So I finally thought, okay, girl, we got to do better than this. And you're right. I have a very successful business. People seek me out to do this kind of work, but it is not easy. And it's not always fun. I make it fun. I'm very fun and I'm very funny, but making the decision to let something go that you don't feel you've been able to fully leverage or express, that's some of the hardest work we'll ever do because we all become attached to these things. And we're like, yeah, but I never really did anything with it. Or I still feel like, you know what? This is the dark side of the gift of being so creative and having so many wonderful ideas. Unless you want to grow a big ass team and manage people, which most of us don't, you have to limit the offers that you're selling to what you can actually manage. And so sometimes I have to have a come to Jesus meeting with someone because they keep trying to talk me out of this. Honey, you can work with somebody else. We don't have to do it this way. But this is how I help people create an ADHD friendly business. If you want to try to find a way to sell 157 offers,
good luck.
And maybe someone else has figured out a way, but that's not what works for me or the people that I've helped.
No. And although we might want to, and I love everything you're saying, it's just so hilarious. Oh my goodness. It's just, oh, yes, I've done that. Oh, I've done that. 10-year cycle. I think I'm pretty much there as well. So what is the hidden fear do you see most that stop ADHD entrepreneurs before they even take action?
The number one fear, I would say, is rejection sensitivity. There's a lot of people who are talking about rejection sensitivity in the ADHD space. In fact, some people are talking about it like it's its own diagnosis. And they'll even say, I had an RSD attack, or I'm having a flare up of my RSD.
Oh.
There's no such thing. I understand. I come from a medical background and a medical family. It is not a separate diagnosis. Rejection sensitivity is something that is pretty common to people with ADHD, but it's also common to other people too. Highly creative people who don't have ADHD, folks on the autism spectrum, people who are queer, people who are mixed race, anybody who feels like they are not the mainstream, conventionally attractive. And there comes with a lot of privilege. So in any way we think I'm different, I have never met a person with ADHD who hasn't felt like there's something wrong with me from a very early age. Now, they'll also be able to recognize they have strengths and they have gifts and they have what some of my friends and I call my magic. But we're mainly focusing on what we suck at and what we struggle with and what we feel that we're flawed in some way. So this idea that if I put myself out there and somebody doesn't like it, what if someone criticizes me? What if somebody shames me? What if somebody questions my credentials? It's like all of these things. And we may think of it as imposter syndrome. A lot of people labeling it that. We may think of it as I just lack confidence. We may attribute it to our childhood abuse history. We may attribute it to having a narcissistic ex, like all the different ways. But ultimately, the courage that it takes to be seen and to be seen as who you genuinely are, and having the audacity to ask people to pay you to help them, whether I have a master's degree, a license, I got credentials up the wazoo, but I don't think that's why people hire me. I think if they happen to know about my credentials, they'll say, at least I know she's legit. She's not just making this up. But they hire me, Karen, I believe, because I'm skilled, because I understand them, and because I'm the real deal. And that means I put it out there. I'll say, yeah, I'm in my third marriage. One of my most popular podcast episodes is the one where I talk in detail about my failed launch. People are so hungry for, and this is an overused word, so I'm going to throw up in my mouth a little bit when I say it, but everyone's talking about being authentic. And it's so played out. I'm just like, ugh. In truth, folks who are neurodivergent, whether you're on the autism spectrum, whether you're ADHD, whether you're ADHD, which is you have both, we are deathly afraid of being rejected, of being excluded, of being criticized. So when we put ourselves out there, and putting yourselves out there, that runs the whole gamut of just about everything you need to do as a coach or consultant. You need to market your business. Unless you happen to have a huge network of people who need exactly what you offer, you need to market yourself, whether that's content marketing, social media marketing, email marketing, in-person networking, webinars. There's lots of ways to market, or even advertising. But people need to know who you are, what you do, who it's for. So you need to market yourself. That comes with the inherent risk that someone's going to think, who does she think she is? And then we think, ooh, who do I think I am? We tend to think about all of our flaws and shortcomings and failures, not our gifts, strengths, and expertise. So we talk ourselves out of putting ourselves out there before we even do it. I cannot tell you the number of people that I have met who have literally a beautiful website, books they've written, and that have been edited, like the cover, the whole thing. And I can tell you about my podcast story if you want. But it's like they have the thing, they have the brand asset, the website, the podcast, the book, the course, the whatever, all ready to roll. They have not pulled the trigger and put it out there. Why? Predominantly fear based on rejection sensitivity. And also, every once in a while, everybody loves to talk about fear of failure. There are many of us who also
fear success
because we don't think we deserve it, because we don't think we can handle it. And especially for folks with ADHD, we think I'm not consistent enough to be able to maintain it, even if I can ring that bell. So for all those reasons, and it's like, if I don't put myself out there, I can't be rejected. If I don't reach for the success, I won't have to fail. And if I don't get to where I think I may be capable of, if I don't ever allow myself to get there, then I never have to experience the pain of realizing I can't sustain it. I can't maintain it. I can't keep it going. So better that I just keep it small. And what's hard for me, Karen, is that most people would see that and think that's imposter syndrome. I help people with imposter syndrome, or that's perfectionism. I can help you with perfectionism, or that's fear of being seen, or fear of being visible, or fear of success. When you have ADHD, it's more nuanced than that. We don't trust ourselves to be able to do anything on an ongoing basis. So the easiest way to avoid the pain of that is just don't do it to begin with, or play at it, but don't fully put it in front of people.
I can totally relate again. It's funny. I have my business, but I also work within a team. And I tell you for why. It's because there's a little bit of accountability.
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
terrible with notes, and I'm terrible with at the end of the day, I think it's so good these days for people with ADHD because we have these systems, right? So yes, if you're putting yourself out there, you're the authority. You combine that with the infrastructure, where what that looks like, whether it's different CRMs, whether it's ClickFunnels, Go Highlight, it doesn't matter what it is. It's like, I would not remember everything. If it's not in my calendar, I'm not remembering it, right? However, the issue that I have always had, it's always taken me longer to complete my own program, for instance, because it's very easy to put things off till tomorrow.
Yes.
Whereas being part of the team and doing sales, because I love it and it's all linked to what I do, but there I am, I'm going to work my butt off. There's a little bit of competition as well because there's other people. I've got a bit of accountability there because it's not, and it's a shame because why do I work so hard for other people? Am I chasing validation? I don't know. I don't know what that is. Whereas why don't I do the same when it's for my business? But I'll admit, there's a distinction, right? It's very different. And so I have found personally that this now works for me. I'm happy being part of the team and doing so many hours for that, as well as doing my own, because it's weird. It's almost like I'm fearful of being lazy, which is crazy because I'll overwork. But somehow I've just come to the conclusion, I enjoy this side, I enjoy that side, and that keeps me accountable, because if I didn't have that, I might get lazy. Does that even make sense?
It makes 100% sense. And I think, and actually this is something I see with nearly all of my clients, is when they're explaining something to another person, they often end with, if that makes any sense. Or does that make sense?
You're asking, is that okay? Or am I broken?
You know what? Because we are so accustomed to being misunderstood. And we have a hard time understanding ourselves as well. So when we don't really make sense to ourselves, and as we're trying to make sense to others, we realize, oh my God, I don't even know. We need some validation. And does this make sense? Because we already know we think differently. And we've had plenty of feedback across our lifetime in the form of, why are you doing it that way? Why can't you just, why are we doing this over again? Or my favorite, oh my God, this was such a trigger for me. As we've discussed, Diann, because I have a terrible memory. So I would ask the same question more than once, and I would try to vary it so it wasn't super obvious. But it's amazing what I'm able to forget. And this is not an intelligence issue. I know I'm intelligent. I know I'm educated. I know that I'm successful. But my memory, I refer to it as Swiss cheese brain. Some stuff sticks to the cheese. Some stuff slides through the holes, and I have no control over what's going where. So it's just amazing. The trivial stuff that I will be able to hold on to, I'm like, this is so lame. But important stuff, there it goes. So I think, to your point, it is challenging to be fully responsible for your business with an ADHD brain, because most of us end up as entrepreneurs because we don't want to have a boss. But it's an entirely different thing to take full responsibility for being the boss of yourself. And I think one of the things I teach and practice, and this took a lot of time, is radical self-acceptance. Now, some people hearing that will think, oh, is that love my ADHD, or lower your standards, I have ADHD, or hey, I can't help it, I have ADHD. No, that's not what radical self-acceptance is. Radical self-acceptance is taking ownership of the responsibility for knowing who I am and how I am, understanding my values, strengths, and struggles, and creating the life that works with those strengths and getting the support I need to minimize the negative impact of those struggles. And if that means, I highly think most of us need a virtual assistant, and a lot of people fight me on that for all kinds of reasons. But I actually interviewed someone on my podcast, ADHD-ish, recently, who runs an agency training virtual assistants for entrepreneurs with ADHD. And I was asking in the interview, is it an issue of the right time in your business? Is there a right time to hire a VA? Or do you have to reach a certain income level? Or do you have to have a certain number of clients? Like, what is the right time to hire a VA? I was fascinated with her answer, Karen. She said, when you can ask for help and receive help without shame, that is the right time. If you're not able to do that yet, do not hire a VA. So this radical self-acceptance is, it doesn't make any sense at all to hire help, to hire a coach, to hire a consultant, to hire a social media manager, to hire a virtual assistant. It doesn't make any sense to hire any kind of help in your business as a person with ADHD if you feel ashamed of the fact that you need help. When you can say, there are things I am brilliant at. And I can say that now without worrying that I sound like an a-hole, right? There are things I am legitimately brilliant at. I own that. There are things I am really pathologically horrible at, and I can't fix them. And I could waste the rest of my life trying to get better at those things. How much wiser and smarter and saner and more self-accepting is it to get the support I need, oftentimes in the form of accountability and practical guidance for things that I'm just not good at? It doesn't make any sense for me to spend time trying to get good at things I'm not good at when I can make good money doing the things I'm already good at. But that's an inside job. And that means we have to be able to forgive ourselves, and we have to be able to release the past, and we have to be able to say, that was then and this is now. When we know better, we can do better. But we're only going to do better when we are willing to accept the fact that we're still going to make mistakes, no matter how hard we may try to get our you-know-what together. You're still going to be human, like everyone, right? So it's really a personal development path as well.
Yeah.
Everybody's got
when
something.
when you're aware,
Yes.
see, before I was never aware.
Yeah.
And so when you understand the traits and you're like, oh, okay. And then it's not a superpower, because I know there's things in my life that maybe could have gone better if I wasn't. However, I'm accepting, like you say, you've got to accept it. I'm okay being me. I'm quite happy. I'm well aware of the things that I'm not so good at. And like you say, you outsource. But I don't know whether I've ever felt shame about that one. That's just me personally. But yes, just get help and get somebody who is better than you at that. Otherwise, what is the point? And so do you think, like we said, ADHD probably suits us being podcasters because every day is differently. We're having different conversations with different people from all walks of life. That's why I love it, definitely. And I learn something. I'm learning so much from you. I know you have a very successful podcast. And so I wanted to touch on this because this show is all about helping coaches grow their business, basically, whether we're talking about strategy, messaging, whatever that looks like. Now, you've had massive success and you're in the top 1%, or are you higher right now?
I think it's 1.5%.
1.5, come on.
But who's counting, right?
Yeah, and I do say we shouldn't chase the vanity metrics. However, come on, when you're seeing that much growth, do you have any tips for the listeners out there who are maybe just starting on their podcasting journey, or even somebody with ADHD who's just maybe thinking that it might be a good fit for them?
To podcast. First of all, I have to just insert, because anyone listening who's at a very different point in their journey might listen to someone like me or look at someone like me and think, must be nice, I'll never get there. This took time. When I started my podcast, I had already been guesting on different shows for 2 or 3 years. I started off guesting and I have a communications degree. My bachelor's degree is in communications. My first career was in sales. I've always been a talker, a word nerd, a storyteller. And I thought I was going to go into broadcasting or journalism. I ended up going into sales instead. But it's easy for me to communicate verbally. I'm a good speaker. I can be on stages. I don't get scared. That's a natural gift. Many people have a desire to do that. And if you have a natural gift to some degree, it definitely makes your path easier. But in spite of all that, in spite of my speaking background, in spite of the fact that I had a couple of years, maybe 3 years experience podcast guesting, when I decided, okay, I'm going to launch my own show and pull the trigger on that, Karen, it took me 2 years. And to put some context around this, I had claimed the URL. I had the show art. I had the hosting. I had the professional mic and headphones and equipment. I literally had read, I don't know how many, at least a dozen books on launching a podcast, and listened to maybe even 100 episodes of podcasts on how to launch a podcast. I went through 2 complete podcast launch coaching programs. One of them was quite pricey, and I still hadn't pulled the trigger. Why? Rejection sensitivity was part of it, but I didn't have accountability. So what finally got me off the fence or off the pot, or whatever analogy you want to use, I love analogies and metaphors, is I put myself into a group where it was a challenge. At the beginning of the challenge, it was a 4-week challenge. You announced, by the end of this 4 weeks, I will have. The goal was either, you could frame it as, this is my ideal outcome, and the levels are good, better, best. So I want an A, a B, or a C. If you get it done, you automatically get a C. But if you want better, you get a B. And if you want even better, you get an A. We were put in groups of 5. And there were like 5 groups. So there were about 25 people in this challenge. So you were supporting people within your group, and each group was in a friendly competition with every other group. In 4 weeks, I had my best outcome and a published podcast. Now, why did this make a difference when all of the other things I had done hadn't got me off the fence? It was the public accountability and the support of other people who were also challenging themselves to do something hard that they hadn't been able to do on their own, and the friendly competition of, hey, it was, like I said, public accountability, support, and friendly competition. That literally pulls of the 4 ways a person with ADHD can get themselves to take action: interest, challenge, novelty, and urgency. It pulled all 4 levers. Once I got out of the starting blocks, I just kept going. We recently published episode 315. I have never missed a week, and I'm now in the top 1.5% globally.
Amazing.
And it almost didn't happen. It almost didn't happen.
But it takes time. So this is it. It's so interesting. Everybody they're chasing this instant gratification, and then they're off on that shiny object and that shiny object. And nobody really realizes that if you put the hard work on the front end, life will get easier on the back end. But they want the easy now, which means it's going to be hard for them later on. And the podcasting, I do. And I love that you just said that you guested for 2 to 3 years.
Yes.
Because my business, personally, I was almost going to pack this up because I was launching people and I'd be so excited about the launch for them, but they weren't continuing. They weren't sticking at it.
Yeah.
So there was no longevity and they were giving up too soon. And I'm thinking, why are they giving up? I've been doing this for. And I realized that, yes, maybe you should go and guest initially, get your story out there, promote yourself in front of audiences that are right fit for you before you even think about launching your own show. So thank you for that, because that's given validation for that. I was just too eager in the beginning.
You know what? I'll be honest with you, Karen. I think when I first launched, and by the way, I rebranded the show in September of 2024. The show was initially The Driven Woman Entrepreneur. And I realized after several years that even though, and by the way, when people say, oh, you can't get clients from a podcast, I'm living proof that you can. It is the number one. It was initially my top of funnel. So during the pandemic, I launched in May 2020, early pandemic. People were at home, people weren't commuting, people had time. So a lot of people were listening to podcasts. At that time and for several years, my funnel was people. And by the way, I continued to guest even though I had my own show. And here I am as a guest now, right? So now I'm 5+ years in. I release an episode every single week and I guest on other shows on a regular basis. And I promote those shows as much as I promote my own, because you're just getting more seeds out there with your name on them. But this idea that we have to figure it all out before I can pull the trigger. No, I totally rebranded, renamed the show, because I realized if someone sees Driven Woman Entrepreneur, they're not necessarily going to know if they have ADHD or not. And I thought, I'm just going to really make it much more clear that this is who it's for. And I also wanted to remove the gender focus, because I like men. I have 2 sons. I have a husband. I've had a couple husbands. I don't want to only work with women. So I realized, no, I need to open things up. So that's another thing. Be a guest first, launch before you're ready, and don't be afraid to pivot, rebrand, start over, because I learned I needed to do that. And since doing that, the show's become even more successful, because I think people would see the Driven Woman Entrepreneur and they didn't necessarily know. So is this for female entrepreneurs who are very driven, or is this for female entrepreneurs who want to be more driven? I didn't really recognize that wasn't clear. And calling the show ADHD-ish, that was taking advantage of the fact that I think many people now realize, this is probably me, but they're not diagnosed and they don't want to be diagnosed. And I'm no longer a therapist. So I don't care if people are diagnosed or not. What I care about is they're entrepreneurs who identify with the strengths and struggles that we call ADHD, because I know I can help them. So I think, and one more thing, not everybody is meant to have a podcast. Some people
Totally
think,
agree.
oh, the person I admire has a podcast, so I need a podcast too. This is not the right content platform for everybody. Some people are really good writers, but they
Mhm.
get gummed up when they're in a live conversation or they feel put on the spot. I
Mm.
can write, but it's much more natural for me to speak. And some people would do much better with a private podcast, a limited edition private podcast, instead of the ongoing open ended responsibility of a public podcast like ours. So it's like, it's nuanced. There's no one
Yeah.
size fits all in one way to do it.
You've got to find what works for you. So I'm sure there's listeners out there thinking, I think I might need a bit of help with my traits. What should the listeners do next?
I like to say, if you like my voice and what I have to say with it, you should definitely check out my public podcast, ADHD-ish, on all the popular platforms. And I've got a couple other things too, and I'd be happy to share the links with you so you can include them in the show notes. I have a private podcast specifically around the issue of rejection sensitivity. Whether you're ADHD or not, rejection sensitivity is one of the things that tends to hold people back as coaches and consultants. And I would love to share that with them. And if I can give one more resource, I recently launched a digital clone of myself because I work with people one-on-one. I work with a limited number of people at a time, and not everyone is ready to work with me or resourced to work with me. But if they want to feel like they're working with me and they are already using ChatGPT or Claude, you can sign up for free to chat with Die AI. And Die AI is my ADHD business coach digital clone that has been trained exclusively to my frameworks, my methods, and everyone who's using it said, I'm amazed how much it sounds like you.
There you go. And where can they get this from? We'll have it in the show notes. So if you're driving or walking the dog, you can go back to the show notes and get it. But if you want to hear the link, where do people go to get that?
The simplest way is to go to my website, which is diannwingertcoaching.com. And Diann is spelled Diann. Wingert is Wingert. And on that site, you will find the public podcast, a link to the private podcast, and a link for Die AI. One-stop shopping.
Amazing. I knew this is going to be fascinating, this conversation, and I've loved this. So thank you, Diann, for taking your time out today to speak with us. And guys, to the listeners, look, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with something practical. Now, Diann, what a speaker anyway. Sharing stories. This is what it's about. As she said earlier, that we've got to come away from being afraid to share the stories of our failures, because people can see themselves in those failures and realize, okay, it's okay because she went through that too. And that is what actually shifts people to take action more than unfortunately, many want to come on a podcast and talk about their accolades and their everything that they've done, and it's all me. And that isn't what shifts the listener. It's all about trying to shift the belief in the listener and for them to come to the conclusion themselves. So I do also have something a little bit practical for you. I'm not a natural storyteller. So what I've done, I've created a custom trained ChatGPT to help you. So if you're just going to talk away, and especially if you're ADHD, you'll chat a lot. What did you call us? Chatty Cathys. You can do that and share your story to this custom trained ChatGPT, and it will help you deliver that story in a way that's going to bring the audience in. I call it my story bank. And if you can build up a bank of stories for your podcast guest appearances, then There you go. That is what you need. So this is to help coaches and consultants uncover and organize the stories that naturally communicate their expertise, their personality, and the transformation. What is the transformation that you can create? Because people will connect with, here's that word again, Diann, authenticity far more than perfection. If you're chasing perfection, you'll be chasing forever. You're not going to get it. So go to podcastprofitsunleashed.com/free. And if you are thinking you want a guest on podcast before launching, I also have on there my 4-part mini course, the Podcast Profits Funnel. So, Diann, it's been great speaking with you. And to the listeners, I'll be back next week. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to today's episode on the Podcast Profits Unleashed podcast. If you're